Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Cody Cassady, and I'm the Outreach Associate here at GuideStar. We are thrilled to have you all join us today to discuss major gifts fundraising with Amy Eisenstein. For those of you that have joined an event with us and Amy in the past, I'm sure you'll agree that Amy is an expert in her field, so I hope you're as excited as I am to learn about how to get started with major gifts fundraising. Before we begin, just a couple of notes and reminders. First, we're recording today's event, so don't worry if you'd like to go back and review any of the conversation today. You'll receive an email within a few days with links to the slides and a recording from today's presentation. And next, we've blocked off time at the end of today's presentation to answer your questions. So if any questions come to mind during today's presentation, simply drop them in the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. I'm sending out a chat right now in that box, so you should see it. That's where you can drop your questions as you have them. We'll get to as many as we can at the close of today's presentation, but please feel free to submit them along the way. And with that, I'm now happy to introduce Amy Eisenstein, a fundraising consultant, author, and speaker. Amy has published books on this and other related topics, including Major Gifts Fundraising for Small Shops, Raising More with Less, and 50 Asks in 50 Weeks. Amy is an AFP Master Trainer and has achieved the Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive certification. Amy has previously served as the president of the board of the AFP New Jersey chapter. And in between all of that, she also runs, of course, amyeisenstein.com, a fundraising resource I'm sure many of you all are familiar with. So as you can see, for those of you feeling like you have much to learn about major gifts today, don't worry. We've got just the person to help us. Amy, thanks so much for joining us today. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Cody. Thanks for having me. Hello. And I just want to say quickly that the slide very slowly. If there's a big lag, Cody, let me know, and I'll try and change them a little fast prematurely. But anyways, so let's just get started. But if the slides are changing very slowly, let me know. So today we're going to talk about getting started on raising major gifts and the Major Gifts Challenge. And in order to really get started talking about major gifts, we have to first talk about how big is major and what do we mean by major gift, because I think that the term major gift can be deceiving and means something different to everyone. And so I just want to start out by saying that a major gift isn't necessarily $1 million. It's whatever a major gift is at your organization. And it's different at each organization depending on who the board members are, what your donor history is, who's in your donor database. Just a really quick story. When I started in fundraising, I was a development director at a battered women's shelter. And there, $5,000 was a major gift for us. We didn't get that kind of gift very often from individuals, and so it really was cause for excitement and dancing around the office, to be truthful, when we got a gift of that size. It was major for us. My next job was at Rutgers University, and a major gift there was $25,000. That's where we started the major gift level. And it went up from there. And just down the road from us was, of course, Princeton University, and there they didn't talk about major gifts till 100,000 or more. And that was more than 10 years ago, more than that actually, so it's probably $1 million now. But the point is that whatever your major gift level is where you're at. So it might be $500, it might be $1,000, it might be $10,000 or $25,000. And a couple of quick ways to figure out what a major gift is at your organization. One is if you open an envelope, a check comes in from an individual, and you want to go tell everybody in the office, that is a major gift. It doesn't happen very often, and it doesn't have to be a total outlier, like $1 million and you've never gotten that before. But you should get checks of this size 5, 10, 20, 30 times a year, but maybe not so frequently that you don't want to still get up and dance at your desk when one comes in. So that's just my rule of thumb. But if you really want to figure out what a good donor major gift level is for you, I want you to take your top 10 donors and from this year and last year and average them and maybe round up a little bit, and that would be a good starting major gift level. And the reason that it's important to sort of know what your bottom major gift level is one, for recognition purposes, right? How are we going to recognize our major donors? Who's going to get a phone call? Who's going to get a plaque? What types of recognition you're going to do? Also, it's important to know what your major gift levels are because of use of your time. Is it a good use of your time to go out and talk to somebody and ask for $1,000? If that's exciting to you, then $1,000 is probably a major gift at your organization. If you're shaking your head thinking, you know what, I have so much to do, I couldn't possibly sit down with someone face-to-face unless I was asking for at least $5,000 or $10,000 or $25,000, then you have a sense of what a major gift is at your organization. And the last quick reason for knowing what a major gift is at your organization is in terms of keeping track of metrics and benchmarking, which we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. So first, let me talk about what is the challenge, because we talked about the major gift challenge. And a few years ago on my website, I decided I was frustrated with only the big organizations getting major gifts. Universities, some hospitals, some international organizations, and all the rest of nonprofits I was working with were struggling to raise major gifts or really being unsuccessful. And so one of the things I did a few years ago was I challenged people at organizations to commit 5 hours a week to raising major gifts. And I said, if you just spend 5 hours a week, a few hours a week focused on raising major gifts, I know that anybody at any sized organization can really start seeing success. And that is what happened. It was really exciting. And so following up on a year's worth of blog posts talking about that, I decided it was time to put some research behind my theories. And so I did a research project with Dr. Adrian Sargent, who is probably one of the most well-known and respected academics in our field. And we asked the question, can small and mid-sized nonprofits really raise major gifts? And if so, how? Right? Can they do it? And if they can do it, how can they do it? And we did a whole research project on that. And the results you can download if you want to see them. There's the executive summary, or the full research report is at masteringmajorgifts.com. But I'm going to give you some of the results on our call today. So I just wanted to give you some of that background so that you could have a sense of this was a theory. I've worked with hundreds or maybe thousands of clients and nonprofits on raising major gifts and getting started raising major gifts, and then we have some research to back up the theory too, which is quite exciting. So here are a few of the results, and then we'll get really down into the weeds about how you apply them and how you can use the results from this research project to start raising major gifts yourself. So one of the things that we found, one of the research results that we found, was that staffing matters, that staff, how long you've been at your organization impacts the results that you're getting from raising major gifts. So the number of gifts that an organization gets correlates directly to the number of years that the development staff members have been at the organization. So we found that for every additional year that a development director stayed at their organization, they would raise an additional, on average, 6.5 major gifts. So if you're getting started in year 1 at your organization and you are raising 10 major gifts, then in year 2, the average is that you'd raise 16.5 major gifts. So an additional 6.5 major gifts for the first few years. And then, we expect that it goes up from there. But of course, as you probably know, tenure is not so strong in our sector. People change jobs frequently, and the average stay rate is under 2 years for development staff at organizations. And so unfortunately, we didn't get so much data past year 3 or 4 because people weren't staying at their jobs. So I just want to do a quick poll to see where everybody on the call is. How long have you been at your job? So that's the question. So if you could just quickly answer, 1 to 3 years, less than 1 year, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 years or longer, and between jobs at the moment. Okay, we're seeing the results come in. So it looks like most of the people on the call, which is the average nationally, have been at their job for less than 1 year. The next frequent amount is 1 to 3 years. We've got about 20%, 5 years or longer, which is awesome, but only 8% in the 3 to 5 year range. So 70% of the people on the call have been at their job for less than 3 years, it looks like. All right, so let's keep going. So to me, one of the most important things that we can do as a sector, as a community, is talk about how to stay at your jobs longer. Because we have research that tells us, and we know this fundamentally, we know fundraising is about relationships, and so we need for people to stay at their jobs longer so they can develop these relationships and raise more major gifts. And so here are just a few things. Only one of them, maybe 2 of them, cost money. Things that might be able to help people stay in their jobs longer. And so a happy work environment. That's one I'm starting with. I think that often we overlook this, but if you have great colleagues, and not that work needs to be fun all the time, but a relaxed work environment and with gratitude, then it's easier to stay in your job longer. Appropriate goals is a huge one. I see frequently board members being frustrated with development directors and development directors being frustrated with goals that maybe are set for them inappropriately with unrealistic expectations. That's a frequent cause of development directors leaving. Of course, salary. Now, a lot of times I'll hear that organizations tell me, well, we can't possibly give this person a raise, but when the development director leaves, they magically have money for a search, and of course they're losing money while they don't have somebody in place, on and on. I don't have to tell you. I think sometimes a small bump in salary could keep somebody there for longer. Flexible time off, a flexible schedule and additional days off doesn't cost a thing. And of course, professional development is huge. So anyways, just a few things to help keep you at your jobs longer. I hope that the next time we run this poll, we see you staying at your job 3 to 5 years or 5 years or longer. So another result that we found in the research was that training works. And we found that people who engage in training and continuing education were able to raise additional major gifts significantly. So we found that for each additional training opportunity, meaningful training opportunity, like a multi-day conference, certainly CFRE or diploma programs, people were raising an additional $37,000 a year or more. That was the average. And even for a webinar like this, a 1-hour webinar, we were seeing people raise more major gifts, not $37,000 more, but more than their colleagues who weren't participating in continuing education. So this, you know, the researchers, the academics who were crunching the numbers were so startled by this finding that they ran it 3 or 4 different ways to make sure that they were reading the results right. It's so amazing that if you invest, you know, a few $1,000s in a multi-day conference or even time to get your CFRE, it could result in an additional $37,000 or more in major gifts raised. So training works. The next result that I want to tell you about is metrics. And we found that most organizations were not tracking their metrics well when it comes to raising major gifts, and that if they were tracking metrics at all, they perhaps were tracking the wrong metrics. So I want to just point out that what we track, what we pay attention to, what we measure, we really pay attention to, right? There's a picture of a Fitbit. I'm wearing mine right now. The only way I know how many steps I'm taking is by wearing my Fitbit, and of course I'm going to take more steps because I'm stressed out that I haven't gotten enough. But if I wasn't wearing it, I would never know. I certainly wouldn't get up and run around the house a few extra times at the end of the day if I hadn't gotten all my steps in. Same thing with raising major gifts. We have to know what to track and what we're looking for in order to raise major gifts. And so I have this free metrics worksheet for you right here at masteringmajorgifts.com/metrics that you can go and look at all the good metrics that I'm going to talk about right now. So I want to say that what we found was that the most frequent metric that organizations were looking to were tracking, of course, was dollars raised. That was the most frequent metric, and obviously you need to track that. However, that is not the only metric you should be tracking, and it certainly isn't the end-all, be-all. So what should you be looking at? You should be looking at donor satisfaction. You should be looking at trust in leadership. These are two of the key ones that people really aren't tracking. And when you download the metrics worksheet that I just referred to, it's going to give you a survey and tell you how to start to track this with your donors, that you can send the survey by email. You can sit down and have a conversation in person. You can mail this out. But you should be surveying your donors at least once a year to gauge their donor satisfaction, their trust in leadership, because these are really key, especially when it comes to raising major gifts. Of course, you want to be tracking retention and attrition rates. How many major donors that you got this year are not returning as major donors next year? How many new major gift donors are you getting every year? If you've been paying attention to fundraising trends in the past few years, you know that retention is king, right? You want to be retaining your donors even more than acquiring new ones. Not that you're not going to pay attention to acquisition, but you really want to make sure that you're keeping the donors you have, especially in major gifts. You want to track meaningful visits. Now, I say meaningful visits with people because sometimes I've seen development directors at organizations where they count every time they bump into them on campus or at their gala or golf outing. That's not a meaningful visit. It's wonderful that they're coming to those types of things, but that's not a sit-down one-on-one conversation that you're having. And so this is a really important metric to be tracking, because if you're not out seeing your donors, you're not raising money from them. And so if you're stuck at your desk doing grant writing and event planning, you're probably not out meeting with your donors or raising major gifts. So to me, a meaningful visit is a really important metric to track. Ask to thank ratio, this is one I got from Lynn Wester, who's the donor relations guru, if you've heard of her. She talks about how frequently are you asking in comparison to how frequently you're thanking. So are you asking a donor and then thanking them and then asking again, or are you asking and then thanking several times in multiple ways? Gift size, obviously you're going to track gift size. Is your gift size going up or down with regard to major gifts and new donors? So lots of things to track. So I just want to go back for 1 second to talk about, I said quickly that dollars raised may not be the best indicator always. And the example I give on this slide is that one donor at 100,000 does not equal 10 donors at $10,000 each. And let me explain what I mean by that. And both scenarios, you're raising $100,000. So let's say in year one, you have 10 donors and they give you $10,000 each. And your major gift program has raised $100,000, and that's what you're reporting to the board, and that's wonderful. And the very next year, 9 of your donors don't return, but one of your donors does give $100,000. And you report to the board that you raised $100,000 in major gifts, same as last year. And everybody thinks that you're doing well and you're doing great. But you and I know from this that that's not necessarily the case, because you've lost 9 of your major gift donors. So where did they go? What happened to them? So you know by tracking other metrics that your major gift program potentially is going down the tubes because you're losing 90% of your donors. So that's why dollars raised, you know, we're always going to track it. It's one of the most important metrics everybody's paying attention to, but it's not the end-all be-all metric, and we have to pay attention to other things. Okay, so let's talk about how, so those are just some of the results from the research project I wanted to share with you. I'll share a few more as we go through. But first I want to just show you this very basic fundraising cycle so that you know how to get started and really get your major gift program off the ground as a result of this call. So, basic fundraising cycle, step 1, identification. Who are you going to raise major gifts from? Step 2, cultivation, building relationships with those folks. Step 3 is solicitation. That's the actual ask. And then step 4, of course, is stewardship. So we're going to go through those 4 steps quickly as we move through the slides. But now we're going to start by talking about your fundraising board, because to me, this is one of the most important things to get started with. Do you have a fundraising board? Do you have 100% participation, meaning does every board member give and make a gift, and do they help with fundraising? Because this is the first building block of any major gifts program. You can't get started without your board members, at least at a minimum, making gifts themselves, because when you go out to other major donors, you have to be able to say the people closest to our organization, our board members, understand the importance so much that they give not only their time, but they also give their money. So now I'd like to know from you, we're going to go to our second quick poll. Do you have 100% participation? So there are 3 choices here. Yes, absolutely. 2 is almost, we're working on it. And 3rd is not even close. So let's see, the answers are coming in now. We've got, okay, so we've got 33% at yes, absolutely. We've got 39% at almost, we're working on it, and 7% not even close. So I would say that the very first step, the vast majority of you on the call don't quite have 100% participation yet. And if you can't convince your own board members that your organization is worthy of a financial contribution, you're not going to be able to convince anybody else. So that's why this really is the first step, and getting your board members on board. So your number 1 goal for 2017 is get 100% participation. For those of you, 34% of you on the call who said yes, absolutely, we have 100% board participation. Now it's about getting their board giving up. So is every board member giving at capacity, meaning what I mean by that is a meaningful and significant gift for their own personal budget. So are your board members making leadership level gifts and significant financial gifts for their own budget? So that's your next challenge. If you have 100% participation, great. Now it's about getting your board member giving up so that you can say our board plays a leadership role, and they are pioneering the way for our major gifts program. Okay, so now step 1 in the fundraising cycle after you have your board on board is identification. So really it's about who are you going to ask for major gifts, or certainly who are you going to hopefully ask for major gifts. And so one of the things that we found in the research project that we did was that who is in your portfolio or prospect list, whatever you want to call it, in your pipeline, your major gifts pipeline, is really, really important, and it makes a significant difference whether you're going to be successful or not at raising major gifts. So we need to pay attention to who is in your portfolio or your pipeline. And so one of the things that we found in the research was that if you had too many people in, well, I don't want to say it that way. For every additional prospect or potential donor, prospective donor in your portfolio or on your prospect list that you had, we actually saw a decrease in major gifts raised by $300 on average. So what does that mean? If you think about it in terms of direct mail, it's like an acquisition mailing. You have to do some investing in acquiring new donors, which is what this is. But the big red flag that it means for lots of small organizations is if you have 100 or 50 or 500 people that you think you're cultivating for a major gift, it's way too many. You're spinning your wheels, you're wasting time and money, and you're not going to be getting major gifts from significant numbers of those donors, and it's actually costing you a ton of money. The good news is that for when we saw returning donors, so people who had given a major gift at whatever level you consider a major gift, and then they gave a subsequent gift, a next gift. So for all of those people on your prospect list, we saw an increase of an average of $2,200 per potential donor on those lists, so for repeating donors. So the good news is that you should have all of the people who have already given major gifts on your list. So start with the people who already love you and give to you and ask them for increased gifts. But we really want to be cautious about what makes, who gets onto our prospect list. So now I want to talk about what makes a good prospect, a good potential donor for your organization. And we need three things when we're looking at prospects. And that, we can remember it with an acronym ABC. A stands for access. Do you have access to them? B stands for belief. Do they believe in the cause or the mission or your organization? And C is for capacity, and that's actually last. Because I think the problem I've seen, I facilitate a lot of board retreats, and what I see, the conversation is, people start by asking the question, who is rich or who is wealthy? In other words, who has capacity to make a major gift? And that's actually the wrong question to start with. We need to start with A, who do we have access to, and B, who believes in the cause, and then worry about, do they have the ability or the capacity to make a major gift? And the reason that it's wrong to start with asking the question, who's rich, is then we come up with people like Oprah Winfrey or Bill Gates, and we don't have access to them, and they don't believe in the cause, so they're not actually good prospects. So what I want you to do is I want you to, when you're thinking about who are your good prospects or who should be in your portfolio this year, we're going to start with the people already in your database. Because as we talked about, it really needs to be the people who you have access to, who believe in you. Those are people who have already given to you. So I want you to run a couple of lists from your database. I want you to run, first of all, a list of everybody who has given the most to your organization, of course, those who have given the biggest gifts, and also those who have been loyal donors. So anybody who's given 5 times in the past 5 or 6 years, anybody who's given certainly for 10 years in a row. Whatever history you have, use that to look for loyalty giving at any level. So $25 a year, $50 a year, $100 a year. But the more loyal they are, the better. You may not know whether they have the capacity to make a major gift, and maybe they haven't given more because they've never been asked. So once you run your lists, I want you to get together with your best, most connected board members and staff members and rate everybody on your lists in order to make your prospect list or your portfolio of donors that you're going to focus on this year. So you're going to take your existing, your biggest donors and your most loyal donors and give them an affinity rating. They'll get a 5 if they're very engaged board members, active volunteers. They'll get a 4 if they're a little less engaged, and on down 1 if you don't even know their interest, 2 if they just donate once a year but don't ever show up for anything. So that covers A and B, access and belief. That's how engaged they are. You're also going to give everybody on your list a capacity rating. And so you're going to give them a capacity rating, meaning how much do you think they can give based on what you know about them, what they give to your organization and other organizations, based on what they do for a living, where they live, those types of things, any research you're able to do. If you have a wealth screening, obviously you'll use that. So then you're going to give everybody a capacity rating. So this scale may not be right for your organization. You can adjust it, but if you think that they could give a gift of $100,000 or more, whether it's in 1 year or over 5 years, if you're doing a campaign, you could give them a 5. If you think they could give slightly less than that, they'll get a 4. If they can give between $10,000 and $50,000, maybe they'll get a 3, maybe a 2 if they can give between $1,000 and $10,000, and a 1 if they can give less than $1,000. Now, like I said, if a major gift for you at your organization is $10,000 and you don't have anybody in the categories of 3, 4, and 5, then obviously you'll want to adjust this scale so that it works for you. You know, a 5 might be a $10,000 plus instead of a $100,000 plus. But anyways, so then you add up the 2 scores, both your affinity rating score and your capacity rating score, and anybody that has a 7, 8, 9, or 10 probably belongs on your top prospect list and people that you are going to ask for a gift this year, because that means that they have both affinity and capacity, meaning they have all 3, A, B, and C. You have access to them, they're around, they've been donors, they believe in your cause because they've given in the past, and they have capacity because they fell into that, 7, 8, 9, 10, they scored in the top. Now, if you're really just getting started with major gifts, or if you have responsibilities, grant writing, event planning, marketing, other things at your organization, then I want you to start with a portfolio or a prospect list of 20 names. I've worked with organizations, and I'll get there, and I'll either see that nobody's assigned to anybody, which is a problem, or that development directors have lists of 100, 300, 500, 700 names. And unless you are a full-time major gift officer and this is your only job responsibility, you cannot handle more than 20, maybe 30 names at a time. And so I really want you to figure out, using that rating system, who are your top 20 prospects that you're going to ask for major gifts from this year. If you get through that list, great. You'll go to the next 10 or 20. But start with a list of 20. So the next step, now we've identified who you are going to raise major gifts from this year. And so, of course, the next step is cultivation in our fundraising cycle, and that is building relationships. Now, hopefully you have relationships with some of the people on your list. Maybe you have some board members on your list, your biggest and best donors. Maybe you don't know some of the people, but regardless, you want to meet with every single person on that list. That's what cultivation is all about, relationship building. And so you want to, you're going to need to get a first meeting. You're going to need to meet with everybody, even your board members. They may give you actually the hardest time by saying, oh, we don't need to meet. We'll see you next week at the board meeting, or we just saw you at a board meeting. But if you want to ask them for a significantly bigger gift than they've been giving, you do need to sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with them. Check in and find out how things are going and how they want to see things moving forward. So for everybody, make a plan. Why do you want to meet? You know, people that you're calling to meet, the go-to answer is no, that they don't want a meeting. So you're going to have to build a case for why you want to sit down and take up some of their precious time. So do you want to get to know them better? Do you want to ask their advice? You need to really think about what is the purpose of the meeting and actually why it would be good for them to meet. And so the number one reason for meeting, especially initially, is to get their advice. Find out how things are going from their end. Find out why they gave in the first place and what motivates them to continue to give and what they'd like you to see you doing better. Ask their advice about how they think your organization is perceived in the community. But really, so the number one reason that you want to meet, at least with the first meeting, is to ask people's advice. Because if you tell them that you want to meet to tell them about the program and organization or give them an update on what's happening, they're just going to say, send it to us. We'll see it on the website, or we read the newsletter. That's not a good enough reason to take up their time. So it has to be about them. You've, I'm sure, heard the expression, you know, the number one thing that people love to talk about, it's themselves. So this is the case here too. So when you're getting ready to call for a first meeting, you want to write out a script or bullets so that you're prepared to leave a message or talk when the person picks up. Because if you're especially nervous, you may even want to write down, hi, my name is Amy and I'm calling from this organization. Because not that you want to read it, you want to have bullets, not a full script, but you want to hit the points that you want to say. Prepare for objections, because the person you're calling will have objections about meeting. They don't have time, they don't have interest. So what are you going to say? You're going to need to push back. I understand everybody's busy. If it's no time, I'd love to come meet with you really quickly, just for 15 minutes, and I'd be happy to come to your home or office at your convenience. So get around the no time. If there's no interest, say, I completely understand if we're not your top charity. We're so grateful that you have been giving in the past, and I'd love to come learn more about you and what your top charities are, just so that I can get a sense of what people are giving to and I can work with our donors better, right? So just whatever you can think of to come back to. That's okay that, you know, that you're not interested in our organization. But I'm so appreciative that you donated. I'd love to get your feedback anyways. And listen, if they're really, really not interested, they won't meet with you. You want to use your network for getting a first meeting, board members, social media. If you have a connection with that person, leverage that so that they can call and make the introduction. Also, when you pick up the phone, stand up, smile, practice in advance. If you are sitting at your desk thinking, I know I'm going to get another machine, they're not going to meet with me, that is going to come through on your voice. You are going to sound disappointed and dejected already. So stand up, smile, practice in advance. Okay, so key things to do during the first meeting is listen and learn. You want to ask open-ended questions, right? Like, what do you like most about our organization? What do you think needs improvement? Why did you give in the first place, and what motivates you to keep on giving? So you are really doing the listening and less of the talking. I always thought it was my job as a development person to talk, and tell them everything I knew about the organization, but the person on the other end of that conversation was bored to death. So if you're asking them questions and their advice, they're going to be much more engaged and involved. So for each of the 20 people on your prospect list or in your portfolio, I want you to make a one-page cultivation plan. And it's just a simple plan about how you're going to touch them throughout the year and get to the ask. So in January, you might be inviting them for a tour. DOD, of course, means Director of Development. In February, you might be inviting them for coffee. That's the one-on-one meeting with the executive director and a board member. In March, when your newsletter goes out, for the 20 people that are your VIPs, these are your most important potential donors, you're going to pull their newsletter out of their email blast and out of the mail, and you're going to put a personal note on it. If it's going in the mail, it's a post-it. If it's an email, you're going to send it with a note on top that says, hey, I'm writing this to you. I thought you might be interested in the article on page 2, or check out your picture, or whatever it is. Same thing with the April event invite. You're going to personalize it. Put a post-it on it. I really hope you'll join me. I'd love for you to sit at my table, or whatever you want to say. And so on. Just making a cultivation plan for each person on your list, and then, of course, following it so that you're touching them and engaging with them throughout the year. Now, step 3 in our cultivation plan is solicitation, and that, of course, is the ask. And so we have to go from cultivation, our cultivation plan, to solicitation. That's the important conversation, right? That's the ask. Otherwise, there's no point in doing any of this if you don't feel like you're going to get to the ask. All right, so I'm going to share some ask language with you because I think that this is something that makes people really nervous. And so here's some ask language. You're going to practice it, try it on, see how it sounds and feels coming out of your mouth, and then if you love it, you'll use it, otherwise you'll adjust it. So we would like to ask you to consider a gift in the range of $10,000 to support our after-school program. So you might be with a board member. They might have said, listen, I gave a major gift, and now I'm here to ask you to consider doing the same. So that might be we, you, and a board member. In the range of, I didn't actually give a range, did I? If I ask for $1,000 to $10,000, they're going to give me the lowest amount every time. But I'm gonna soften it a little bit by asking for a gift in the range of $10,000. That's the way they can come back and say, listen, that's a lot of money. I could give you 7 or 8, not quite 10 or 5, and then we'd still be having the conversation, which is really what you want to do anyways, to support our after-school program. You could also say to them, to support our operations. If you've had the conversation with them during cultivation and they'd be willing to consider giving to operations, that is not a problem as long as you know that they're open to it. Okay, so the next slide is this little girl eating her plate of spaghetti, and I apologize if you haven't had lunch yet. This slide always makes me hungry, but it just reminds me to share with you that probably asking in a restaurant is not the best place. And I think it's so normal and natural for us to say to someone, will you come out to lunch? But then you have, first of all, you're having a private, confidential conversation about money in a public space. So that's the #1 reason I think it's a bad idea. But also, it's hard to chew and talk. You don't have to make an ask meeting last for an hour, which is, what lunch takes. You can go have a quick conversation in somebody's home or office for 30 minutes. It doesn't have to drag out for a whole meal. In the restaurant, the waiter definitely will interrupt at exactly the wrong time. So just ask someplace private. In their home or office is the ideal place, but your office, or if you have to, in a coffee shop. But there's no reason to do it over lunch. You can always take them to lunch to thank them. So this is about how much to ask for. I think this is the #1 thing that people are frustrated about, is how much are we going to ask for? And the bottom line is that you need to come up with an amount to start the conversation. So here's my rule of thumb for a first face-to-face major gift ask. So you're going to start with their history of giving to your organization. If it's neat, like $1,000 a year for the past 5 years, wonderful. Obviously, it's not always completely neat like that, but what we're going to do to get to our ask amount is multiply their average annual gift by 5. So if in the mail or through your event or through the online donations, they've given $1,000 a year in the past, and now we're sitting down to ask for them for a major gift, I'm going to ask for significantly more. So I'm going to start with 5 times that amount at $5,000. Then I'm going to consider other factors. What do I know about them? Do I have a wealth screening on them? What do I know about their assets? What do I know about what they give to other people's organizations? What do I know about how philanthropic they are? What do we know about what our needs are and how interested they are? So you might go up or down from that $5,000, but you definitely want to ask for a specific amount, and that's the amount we're going to start with, assuming you're not in a capital campaign. That's just your first regular major gift ask for your annual fund. So then after you've asked the question, you want to be quiet. This is their turn to respond. You've asked for a gift. Now you need to go into your meditative pose and not say anything. Because if you're nervous about what they are thinking, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money, you're sweating, you're nervous, so you might come out and say, I know that's a lot of money, how about less? So clearly you don't want to say anything. It's their turn to respond. Now I have to tell you, in all my years of fundraising, there's really only 3 responses they can give. And it will be some version of yes, no, or maybe. Those are the 3 responses. So you should go into your ask meeting being prepared for all of those answers. What will you do if they say yes? What will you do if they say no? What will you do if they say maybe? Now, the good news, wonderful, yes is a wonderful answer. You might, if you get a quick yes, maybe you asked for too little, you should thank them very much, but then make a plan to ask for more next year. If you get no or maybe, your job is to continue the conversation. Say, okay, maybe what do you need, what additional information do you need to make a decision? For no, I'm sorry to hear that. Tell me more about what you were thinking. So don't let that be the end of the conversation. Keep it going. So now you've hopefully gotten a gift. So the last stage in the fundraising cycle, of course, is step 4, and that's stewardship. That's the thank you and follow-up process. And the most important part of the thank you is making sure that the donor feels thanked. It's not just that you sent them a thank you note or a tax receipt. It's that they really understand how grateful you are. So they should be thanked in multiple ways by multiple people. So your board member should call them, the executive director should handwrite a note, the development director should send an email, you should thank them in person, of course. Part of stewardship is also following up with them and letting them know how their gift was used. So that is the fundraising cycle, and we are back to the Major Gifts Challenge, which I told you is a commitment of 5 hours per week. So I am going to challenge you right here, right now, to consider spending at least 5 hours a week to raising major gifts. If you do all of the things that we talked about, identifying donors, well, first working with your board members, then identifying donors, cultivating them, soliciting them, and stewarding them, you will raise significantly more major gifts this year. So let's do a last quick poll. How much time do you currently spend on raising major gifts? Be honest. So almost none, 1 to 5 hours, 5 to 10 hours, or more than 10 hours a week. So let's see what we're getting now. All right, so almost everybody, thank you for your honesty. I appreciate it. More than half said almost none, which is, of course, why you're doing this webinar. But I know you're going to get started. 33% say 1 to 5 hours, and then a small number of you are doing more than that. So, okay, so the next slide is just, again, the research results, if you want them, are www.masteringmajorgifts.com. And now we are going to take the Major Gifts Challenge pledge. And I'm so sorry, the slides are changing so slowly, so I don't know if you're seeing what I'm seeing at this time. But right now we're going to take the Major Gifts Challenge pledge, and that is where you promise to spend at least 5 hours a week raising major gifts so that you can raise more money this year. So if you'll just raise your right hand and turn to somebody in the room next to you, or if you're by yourself, look in the mirror or in your phone mirror or in your camera and record yourself saying, I solemnly swear that I will dedicate 5 hours per week to raising major gifts. If I do this every week for 1 year, I will raise significantly more money for my organization and the cause that I love. So that is my Major Gifts Challenge pledge. Hopefully it popped up on your screen or you have the slides in advance. But now Cody's going to get the questions ready. We have just probably 6 or 7 minutes for questions, but first I want to just do a quick summary, and then I'll let Cody come on the line and do questions. But how you're going to raise major gifts: first, you're going to hire and keep staff. You're going to do everything you can to stay at your job for as long as you can, because that makes a difference in terms of raising major gifts. You're going to provide education and continuing education and training, so good for you for being on webinars like this one. It really does make a difference. You're going to track appropriate metrics, and you're going to engage your board members. And once that's done, of course, you're going to just identify your best and biggest prospects. You're going to build relationships with them. You're going to ask them for money, and you're going to express gratitude and spend your 5 hours a week. So that is it. Let's go to questions. So I ran on a couple minutes longer than I wanted to, but hopefully we'll get to a couple of questions.
Yeah, great.
What do we have, Cody?
Thanks so much, Amy. This has been awesome, and there have been quite a few questions, but it seems like you answered them as we were going along. So everybody, I hope that you found answers so far. We do have a couple lingering questions, and the most common is, can you get the slides, a recording, or review the affinity scale? And the answer is yes, absolutely. You'll get that directly to your inbox shortly after today's event. You'll have links to all of those things. So rest assured that's coming very soon. The next question we got is kind of going way back to one of your first points about staff turnover and sort of the potential, the increased major gifts fundraising potential when staff members stay on longer. We had a question about speculating about why you think that is. Is it that staff member focused? So that staff member is more familiar with the organization, the cause area, or the donor base, and so they're more effective? Or is that the major donor focused, where they're sort of seeing some value and stability in that organization and familiarity with a particular point person? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it is all of the above. So, I mean, we all talk about fundraising being about relationships. So I think it is a trust factor and a comfort level for the donors, knowing that there is stability and feeling like they are turning over their money to people who are going to be there in the future at the organization. But it does. Major gifts takes time. It's not a quick or easy fundraising method. And so you do need to get to know people, their desires, their wishes, what kind of legacy they want to leave, what meaningful impact they want to have. And it takes time to get to know people like that and have them trust you enough to open up. And so I think it does take time, but the research results were very clear that the longer people are in their jobs, the more major gifts they're able to raise. I mean, it also may have to do with you're comfortable and you know the job and you know the routine, and so that you can carve out more time. Your board trusts you more, and so you have more time to dedicate to raising major gifts. But I think it's all of the above. Great,
great. So then next we have some questions about your point about 100% board participation. We have quite a few people that were noting that technically, yes, they do have 100% board participation, but there's still room for growth there. A couple of folks mentioned that their board members are giving, but they're not giving at what they called a leadership level gift, which I thought was a great term. And then we sort of tangentially to that, a couple of folks are mentioning that, yep, they're participating, but they seem unwilling to help us make connections with their network. So what advice would you have for an organization that does, numbers-wise, have 100% board participation, but need a little bit more from those board members?
Yeah, so I think the key is asking each board member individually, in person, privately. So what I've seen is organizations most frequently ask their board members together as a board in a board meeting to say we need 100% board participation, and that's the end of the conversation, so every board member can write a $100 check and not worry about it again. But if the board chair and the executive director or the development director go sit down with each board member and say, we're going to launch seriously our major gift program, and it starts with the board, and we're asking you to consider a gift at $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 so that we can go out to the general community and say, our board as a whole gave $100,000 or whatever it is. I think that that's going to have significant impact, but you need to start meeting with board members individually and not just rely on your board meetings to get them to give, because you need to ask them specifically for what you want from them, and it's going to be a different amount for each board member depending on what their potential capacity is and how long they've been on the board. And I lost track of the second part of the question. What was that?
So making connections, so leveraging their individual network.
Yeah, so I think that one of the challenges we face as development directors, I've seen we ask, again, as a group, you know, can you please give me your connections, introduce us to people, but board members are hesitant to do that. They don't really know what it means. You know, in the olden days, we would say, turn over your Rolodex. Now it's download your phone, and there's no way anybody's going to do that. You're going to get crickets. So when I'm facilitating a board retreat, I do an exercise where I use a piece of flip chart, and I put in the center of the flip chart a circle that says you, meaning each individual in the room, and then spokes off the center wheel like a bicycle. And I say, okay, name big groups of people that you know. So friends, family, colleagues, college friends, people from your religious organization, you know, big groups of people. Everybody has 5 or 10 groups of people that they know. And then I'll say, okay, so that covers A. We have access to them, right? We're going back to the ABC acronym of who makes a good prospect for your organization. So now we know who you know. Now I want you to think about who might believe in this cause. Who do you know in each of those circles that might be interested in children or cancer or animals or the environment or the arts or whatever we're doing? And then I want you to pick one person from each circle that you think has capacity to make a major gift at the levels that we're talking about. So if it's $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, so then they can write down one name from each circle. So it's Aunt Betty from the family category. They don't have to solicit everybody or think about everybody from the family category, but now they just need to work on engaging and introducing Aunt Betty. And so each board member makes a list of 5 to 10 people that they're connected to that might have the capacity and that they need to start sending appeal letters to, bringing to events, introducing to the executive director. So instead of just asking them for a list of people, which is overwhelming, just going through it step by step and narrowing it down.
Great. Thanks, Amy. And I see that we are just a minute over, so we have maybe just one more question that I think will be relevant to quite a few of you in the audience based on your questions you've submitted. So Amy, do you have any quick advice specifically for new organizations? So we had some questions about, we don't have a network to start from. We don't have a database. We can't pick 10 top donors because there are less than 10. Yeah. So what advice would you have for new organizations?
Yeah, so I would say that they can do the exercise I just talked about for board members with every staff and board member. So, you know, what we say is we back up. You're probably not ready for major gifts campaign. You're ready for a friend raising campaign as opposed to a fundraising campaign. You need a lot of friends for your organization at this point. So really, every staff member and every board member and every volunteer needs to go through this exercise where they say, who do I know? And who are 5 people that we're willing to introduce to the organization, and probably ask for a gift of some level on behalf of the organization this year. That's how it starts.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks so much, Amy. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. As a reminder, you'll be getting a recording of today's presentation in addition to the slides and the resources that Amy mentioned via email shortly. But thanks in the meantime for joining us, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.